All right, good morning. How is everybody? Good. If I sneeze or wheeze a little bit, it's called springtime. That's what it's called. But that's right. You know, if you didn't like yesterday's weather, I'm glad you stuck around for today. It's Tennessee. It'll change. Hope you had a good week. Well, everybody at your place is doing well. And any announcements we need to make? I don't know of any extras. All right. Well, Genesis 45 is where we are. We're ready for verse 9. Trot along pretty good pace today, maybe. I was reviewing my notes and looking at things and things that we'd gone over last week with regards to the 45th chapter. And I was looking at the idea of when folks, we were talking about forgiveness. We were talking about, of course, the story of Joseph, and Joseph finally is now in the 45th chapter, he's revealing himself to his brothers. And we spent a lot of time talking about forgiveness and forgiving one another. And I was looking back over the 8 verses, especially of the 45th chapter. And I thought, well, you know, there's some great thoughts there that I don't know that we necessarily brought all of them out concerning restoring relationship when folks have gotten at odds with one another. And here's some things, because we've kind of already covered these verses, but here's some things to think about. If you look in verse 1, it said Joseph did not restrain himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried out, "Make everyone go out from me, for no one stood with me while Joseph made himself known to his fathers." Joseph didn't make a spectacle of his father and his brothers. You know, he tried to, in settling the issue, settling the years of separation, the heartache and hurt, he really respected them, and he didn't try to show them up. And then if you go down to verse 2, it says that he wept aloud, and the Egyptians and the house of Pharaoh heard it. That it's all right to have emotions. I don't know where this machoism came in, if you will, that, you know, we can't cry, men can't cry, and it's bad to cry, women can't cry, and doo-dah, doo-dah, doo-dah. When you're going through tough times, it's all right to cry. It's all right. God said there's a time to weep, or Ecclesiastes 3. It's all right. Then if you jump on down to verse 4, Joseph said to his brothers, "Please come near to me." So they came near, and then he said, "I'm Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into slavery." He didn't push these folks away. Now, we find out, you know, they settle at a distance from the standpoint, but he didn't push them away. He even, verse 5, there's some comfort that he gives them, and then if you jump on down to verse 7, he begins to minister to these people. Those are just some thoughts, and we've already covered those verses, but I just looked at those things again, kind of in that light, and found some things that, you know, maybe we'll work that into a sermon sometime, or a series of lessons. Verse 9, those where we are. Genesis 45, verse 9. As Joseph reveals himself, he says, "Hurry and go to my father and say to him, thus says your son Joseph, God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me and do not tarry," or do not delay. "You shall dwell in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near to me." Now, Goshen was a very fertile land. It's kind of interesting that Joseph is over all this, and Joseph is willing to give them maybe not what they deserve, but to give them a very excellent present, a very excellent land. You're going to go to the land of Goshen. You're going to go to this very fertile land that was on the eastern side, or the eastern section of the Nile River. And everything's going to be all right for you and your children, your children's children, your flocks, your herds, and all that you have. "And there I will provide for you, lest you and your household and all that you have come to poverty, for there are still 5 years of famine." So he doesn't push them away. yes, they're at a distance. They're not next door. You know, we might think, okay, in all this forgiveness, maybe we put them next door to us. Well, he didn't put them next door to him, but he did put them closer to him. And he gave them really a very nice present, if you will. And he gave them a good gift. And he's willing to take care of them. And he tells them that there's still 5 years left. So that tells us, think about this, that tells us that the famine was to last how many years? 7. So we're only into it 2 years. And the brothers have already come twice for food, right? And so as they have, it's interesting too. And I thought, as I was looking at this again this week, I thought something just hit my head that probably has hit it before, besides my wife. But joke. But that was, you're in the midst of a famine. Grain was used not just to feed yourself, but to also feed what? Your livestock. Why weren't they killing their livestock off? That would be the first order of business. And if you kill that off, then who has food? You have food to eat. That's one of those things that maybe they were, and they just needed a supplement. And of course, you couldn't kill all of them off at one time either, and you had to feed what you had. And so there's a lot of things in there that may have been true. We just don't know. But it just kind of, as I read over that again, I thought, well, that's an interesting thought. There's a lot of, like I say, there's a lot of who knows in there. But Joseph says, okay, we've still got 5 more years. And so let's get ready. Verse 12, behold, the eyes of my brother Benjamin see that it is my mouth that speaks to you. So you shall tell my father of my glory in Egypt and all that you have seen, and you shall hurry and bring my father down here. Give him a report. No more secrets, no more plots, no more plans. You tell Dad everything that I've accomplished. I want you to think about for a second how Jacob would have felt, and we'll get into that as the story evolves. But before we get there, let's think about that. How would Jacob have felt? The first thing would be if the brothers told him all the truth, and like I say, we'll see the story will evolve here in a little while. The hurt, the anguish of the brothers that didn't get along. Second idea. How about the feeling of relief? The son that you thought had passed is alive. How about the pride you'd have felt? He's accomplished something. He's done well for himself. And how about the hurt then that you would have felt that you missed out on all of that? So as we see, and we'll see Jacob in just a few minutes, but as we think about sort of beforehand, all the mixed emotions that he would have had, and all of the feelings that would have come up for Jacob. You feel for him, or I do. But this is Joseph telling his brothers, let's go, let's get all this out in the open, go tell Dad. And so verse 14 says, then he fell on his brother's Benjamin's neck, wept, and Benjamin wept on his neck. Moreover, he kissed all of his brothers, wept over them, and after that his brothers talked with him. So they begin to make up. They don't just drop the issue, they begin to make up. And as they're making up, it says in verse 16, the report of it was heard in Pharaoh's house, saying, Joseph's brother has come, so it pleased Joseph and his servants well. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, say to your brothers, do this, load your animals, depart, go to the land of Canaan, bring your father, your household, come to me. I will give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you will eat of the fat of the land. Now you are commanded, do this. Take carts out of the land of Egypt for your little ones and your wives. Bring your father and come. Do not be concerned about your goods, for the best of all the land of Egypt is yours. Pharaoh pitches in. Word spreads, doesn't it? I don't care what you want to keep secret, word spreads. Now, there are things, admittedly, you can keep secret, things that may be in between the two of you or maybe within inside of a building that only you do. But by and large, it's hard to keep secrets, isn't it? It's hard to keep something quiet. Word spreads out that Joseph's brothers are come. These are Joseph's brothers. And you know, there's probably some people that had gotten to know Joseph quite well over the 7 years, especially, that he has been over the, as we've been calling it, the food relief program. And they've gotten to know him quite well. They've seen him, probably there's several that didn't like him, but there are those that did like him. And lo and behold, they didn't know anything about his past. Or if they did, now they're seeing the sons, the brothers that they've heard about. Whether he told them about them or not, we don't know. Doesn't matter. But word spreads, and as it spreads, it's interesting that Pharaoh basically just says, okay, bring your family and come on. And we're going to give you everything that we can possibly give you. Take 2 carts. These were 2-wheeled carts. They were, in other words, sort of an adapted chariot in a lot of ways. Bring everybody, bring all the siblings, bring the children, bring all the women, bring all the cattle, bring it all, come, and we're going to take care of you. And you say, why would Pharaoh, if he believed Joseph, and he must have, 7 years of good, wonderful crops, bountiful crops, taxed everybody, got all the goods for the 7 years stored up. People are coming to him, buying. Why would he seemingly give it away? Maybe it's a gift of appreciation to Joseph and the good character for which he had and the way he had conducted himself in the business of Pharaoh. That's more than likely what it is. I mean, it's only a guess. Who knows? But it really does show well on Joseph. Then the sons of Israel did so. Joseph gave them carts, according to the command of Pharaoh. He gave them provisions for the journey. He gave to all of them, to each man, changes of garments. But to Benjamin, he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of garments. And he sent to his father these things: 10 donkeys loaded with good things of Egypt, 10 female donkeys loaded with grain, bread, and food for his father for the journey. So he sent his brothers away, and they departed. And he said to them, see that you do not become troubled along the way. What is he expecting his brothers to do? Yep, with regards to Benjamin. Yeah. The young ones are the spoiled ones, right? Brother. That's exactly right. Right. Same father, different. They were half brothers. Whereas Ben is his only, Benjamin is his only true brother. Yeah, that is an excellent point. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that is very good. That's very true. Anything else? That is, yeah. Well, he says, don't become troubled along the way. So yeah, I think he thought about the bickering that might keep peace. Stay at peace. Go tell Dad. it evidently was going to take a little while. Well, we do know that the journey was not just, something that happened quickly, that there were a few days involved with regards to the journey to and from. And so probably even at that point there would be gathering, even though these folks for the most part were nomads. In other words, they didn't sit and settle. They stayed moving. They didn't have a lot of things to pack up. How long does it take to pack up? If you were to move today, how long would it take you to pack up your house? I heard that. It'd take a while. It would. And, but it still take a day or two to get everything together. And so, yes, but keep at peace. Keep at peace. Then they went up out of Egypt, came to the land of Canaan, to Jacob their father. They told him, saying, Joseph's still alive and is governor over all the land of Egypt. Jacob's heart stood still because he didn't believe them. But when they told him all the words which Joseph said to them, and when he saw the carts which Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of Jacob their father revived. So he goes from being downhearted, disturbed, to being jubilant. He's seeing everything. It's sort of, if you will, if you want to kind of stretch the analogy a little bit, it's a good picture of our faith, isn't it? We can hear of things, but then when we see things, we are folks that work on the idea of sight. Now, but faith is really opposite of that, isn't it? Our faith, and we have faith. We wouldn't be here on Sunday morning if we didn't have faith. I'm not trying to cast a disparaging remark on your faith at all. But our faith, for the most part, is sight-oriented. Now, if we allow ourselves to see what is given to us and see the source of it as it is, being from God, then we understand and our faith grows. So here are these brothers. They go back, they tell Jacob, they say, okay, here, Joseph's alive. He doesn't believe them at first. He's upset. But then he's revived. Faith is revived when things in our life work out the way they should. It's the dark days that we are often disturbed. But the days of the sunshine that give us hope recharge our faith. And it's been quite a few years ago. Tim Frizzell. Tim works at, help me. Creve Hall. Thank you. Creve Hall. Tim was where Tim gave a little talk. And he talked about days that encourage us. And he talked about, of course, he's done so many years working with youth. And if you've ever worked with youth, especially on a long period of time, it gets tough of all that you go through. And he talked about events. Tim talked about events in his ministry that were days that encouraged him. Well, that was the purpose of his lesson, and that's what he did. And he did a good job. But you couldn't help but think, but then there were those other days. There were those days of clouds, those days of difficulties, those days of heartache, and those days of hurt that make the sunshine so much more beautiful. But those are the days, those beautiful days are the days that encourage us. Well, that's when our faith is put on the mountaintop, if you will. That's when our faith is lifted up. And so in many ways, this is sort of a way of looking at from the standpoint of his faith is revived. Then, verse 28, Israel said, is it enough? Joseph, my son, is still alive. I will go and see him before I die. So really his only want is to go and see his son, to see who he is and see where he is, see how he's doing, and see maybe, all the years that he hasn't seen him. Now he's able to see him, and he's able to enjoy him and appreciate him one time before he dies. Anything about this chapter? That's right. Well, I wonder if that's not why Joseph said, see that you do not become troubled along the way. If he knew going home, they're going to have to get their story straight. And there's going to be some back and forth about, who's going to tell Dad and what are you going to tell Dad? And like I say, not me. So, yeah, I agree with you. Anything else? All good. Well, let's jump on into verse 4 or chapter 46. And we're going to skip part of 46. We'll show you in just a minute. So Israel took the journey of all that he had and came to Beersheba and offered sacrifices to God of his father Isaac. They're not going back. I learned, just yesterday, today, this morning, of a lady that I had known of, did not know the lady, but she passed away at 96 years of age back in January of this year. And like I said, I didn't know her, but knew of her, have met her, one of her sons on occasion. But as I was reading her obituary, it talked about how that they had always lived in Mayfield, Kentucky. But then because of circumstances in the family, they had moved to Memphis. Well, they actually had a son and had a grandson there, and I think the grandson had some physical issues. And so they had moved to help them. They were living not in Memphis anymore. They had moved to Henderson, where another son was now, and before she passed away. But it's interesting how that we move on from time to time. And so there's this sacrifice of thanksgiving as they're ready to move on. God spoke to Israel in the visions of the night and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, here am I. And he said, I am the God of your fathers. Do not fear to go down to Egypt, for I will make of you a great nation there. I will go down with you to Egypt. I will also surely bring you up again, and Joseph will put his hand on your eyes. So here's an affirmation. An affirmation from God. God really relieves all the anxiety that Jacob could have. Jacob's wondering not only about his son, but he's also wondering, okay, what about the land that we're going to settle in? Is this really what God wants me to do? We had the promise through Abraham that all of this is a blessing and that God's giving it to us. And am I doing what's right? Am I doing what should happen? Am I doing as God would have me to do? And God speaks to him and says, it's all right. It's all right. And so he says, verse 5, Jacob arose from Beersheba, and his sons of Israel carried their father Jacob, their little ones, their wives, and the carts which Pharaoh had sent to carry him. So they took their livestock and their goods, which they had acquired in the land of Canaan, and went to Egypt, Jacob and all of his descendants with him. His sons and his sons' sons, his daughters and his sons' daughters, and all his descendants he brought with him to Egypt. He brought everything. We're moving in. They may have looked like the Beverly Hillbillies coming in, but they were moving in. And so then, verses 8 through verse 23 just give all the names of all the sons. You look, you see verse 8. It says his sons who went to Egypt. Reuben was firstborn, and then Reuben's sons. Verse 9, sons of Simeon. Verse 10, the sons of Levi. Verse 11, the sons of Judah. Verse 12, sons of Issachar. Verse 13, sons of Zebulun. 14, sons of Leah. Verse 15, his daughter Dinah. All the persons, his sons, his daughters, were 33. And then you go, that's verse 15. Verse 16, you see the sons of Gad. 17, sons of Asher, the sons of Beriah as well. In verse 17, verse 18, Zilpah, the sons of Zilpah. Leah, his daughter, those that she bore to Jacob, 16 persons according to verse 18. Sons of Rachel, verse 19, and you get, of course, Joseph and Benjamin. The sons of Rachel, verse 22, 14 in all. The sons of Dan, verse 23, 7 persons in all according to verse 25. And then it says in verse 26, all the persons who went with Jacob to Egypt, who came from his body, besides Jacob's sons' wives, were 66 persons in all. And the sons of Joseph who were born to him in Egypt were 2 persons. All the persons of the house of Jacob who went to Egypt were 70. So there you get sort of just a summation of everybody that went. So when Pharaoh says, come on, do you wonder if Pharaoh knew that they were all coming? Well, sure, he'd invited all of them, right? Did he know it was 70? Probably, because they probably had a conversation or two along the way. But you have a multitude of people that come. Then he sent, verse 28, Judah before him to Joseph to point out before him the way to Goshen. They came to the land of Goshen. So Joseph made ready his chariot and went up to Goshen to meet his father Israel. And he presented himself to him, fell on his neck, wept on his neck a good while. So there's a reunion, tears of joy, as we talked about. I'm sure tears of regret, probably also some tears of relief. Israel said to Joseph, now let me die, since I have seen your face, because you are still alive. He's now at peace. He's now at peace. I can die. Joseph said to his brothers and to his father's household, I'll go up and tell Pharaoh and say to him, my brothers and those of my father's house who were in the land of Canaan have come to me. The men are shepherds, for their occupation has been to feed livestock. They've brought their flocks, their herds, and all that they have. So it shall be, when Pharaoh calls you and says, what is your occupation? That you shall say, your servant's occupation has been with livestock from youth even till now, both we and also our fathers, that you may dwell in the land of Goshen. For every shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptians. Interesting thought. I want you to go back. I want you to go back to verse 33. Years ago, if you were raised up in the church, or maybe just remember this far back, you remember the name Leroy Brownlow, probably, in our brotherhood. Brother Brownlow was well thought of, wrote a lot of books, preached a lot of different places. Brother Brownlow wrote actually 2 books, and then they synthesized them into one. Questions of the Old Testament and questions of the New Testament. And then a few years afterwards, they moved them into one book, I think it's called Questions of the Bible. But this question was one of those lessons. And the next one we're going to see, probably when we may get to it today, is the question, how old art thou? As the old King James Version says, how old are you? And I went back and looked up what Brother Brownlow said about the 2. They're kind of interesting. But it made me think, when the question's asked, what's your occupation? It should make us all think, what is our occupation? We could say, well, I had a career. I retired, but my career was working in a manufacturing, or my career was an office job, or my career was this, that, or whatever it may be. Well, that's a good occupation. But what really is your occupation spiritually? What's your occupation spiritually? And I said, well, let's think about that. What can I do? Now, admittedly, we are all limited. We're limited by health, and we're also limited by time, but we're also limited by talents. That's all true. I'm not going to give too much away. Our lesson tonight is a little different. I hope you'll be back tonight. It's talking about, I forgot exactly what I've titled it, but it's talking about when we get older. One of the things we say is, well, I can't do that. And I think you can. We may not can do everything we used to do, but we can do probably more than we think we can. And so we'll be looking at that tonight. And I hope you'll come back for that. But this idea of what's your occupation, not just physically, but what's your occupation spiritually? What are you doing spiritually? And admittedly, we don't have to do some great thing, but we do have to do what we can do. And that's the thing. The reason I have that book, I'll share with you, by the way, is back when I was still in college, I was called upon by a man that was in his, Brother Neil was probably in his late 60s. And I would fill in for him when he'd go for a gospel meeting or when he would be on vacation. And Brother Neil called me up one day and said, hey, talk to the elders. I want you to come preach for me. I'm going to be gone in gospel meeting. I said, great. He said, now you're going to teach the adult class in the back classroom. And I said, okay, not a problem. He said, you're going to teach Brother Brownlow's book. I said, okay. I'm not a big fan of teaching from books because the way they think and the way I think are usually different. And people that do that, Lord love them. I'm not one that can, or I guess maybe stubbornly don't. But I said, great. And he said, and by the way, he said, now you got to know your lesson's going to be, the class you're going to be teaching is folks like your parents' age. I said, I got you. He said, and you're going to be in Brother Brownlow's book. How old are you? That's going to be your question that you're going to study. Can you imagine a guy that's, probably 20, talking to 50-year-olds about how old you are? That's not a good idea. That's why I have a book. But I went back and looked at it. I was reminded of it. But we have to ask ourselves the question, what's your occupation? What are you doing? Something somebody'd like to add, say. All right, well, let's move on. That was kind of the plan, too. Chapter 47. Joseph is governor of Egypt. Joseph went and told Pharaoh and said, my father and my brothers, their flocks and their herds and all they possess have come from the land of Canaan. Indeed, they are in the land of Goshen. And he took 5 men from among his brothers and presented them to Pharaoh. Then Pharaoh said to his brothers, what's your occupation? See, the question comes again. They said to Pharaoh, your servants are shepherds, both we and also our fathers. And they said to Pharaoh, we have come to dwell in the land because your servants have no pasture for their flocks. The famine is severe in the land of Canaan. Now, therefore, please let your servants dwell in the land of Goshen. We said, remember, it's a fertile land, it's good land. Pharaoh spoke to Joseph, saying, your father and your brothers have come to you. The land of Egypt is before you. Have your father and brothers dwell in the best of the land. Let them dwell in the land of Goshen. And if you know any competent men among them, then make them chief herdsmen over my livestock. So he not only gives them, if you will, the property, he gives them the means, he also is now going to give one of them a job. Joseph brought in his father Jacob and said to him before Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Jacob, how old are you? This is where Brother Brownlow got the question. And that's a great thought. How old are you? How old are you? And admittedly, we could probably, at least I'll say, my mental age and my physical age are different. But think about this, think about that question along all lines. Physical age, but how about spiritual age? You remember when you were baptized? Do you remember the day. I can't tell you. I can tell you it was in July. I'd have to stop and think. I know I was 12, so that would have been 74. It was a gospel meeting. Wayne Kilpatrick was preaching gospel meeting at my home congregation, and I remember that there were 9 of us that were baptized that night. There were 5 boys and 5 girls and 4 boys that were baptized that night. And so, yeah, I remember those. Do you remember? So how old are you spiritually? Now, how old are you in what we might call, for our sake, let's just call it real age? How old are you? Have you matured as a Christian? Are you more mature? Now, some folks look at that and they get upset at where they were. But where we get in and where we come out are 2 different places in life, or they should be. We don't put in our boat and float down a river and get out at the very same place. We do what? We float down the river and we get out a different place. Now Steve has his boat docked, so he does get out the same place. I knew he was fixing to say that. But when you're floating down a river, you float down, you get off a different place. As we grow spiritually. And so, yeah, we weren't, what we knew when we started out and what we know now, completely different. It's called growth. But are we still growing? That's the question. Are we still getting there? So how old are you? Anything anybody like to say, right? Very straightforward right now. Thinking. Jacob said to Pharaoh, the days, the years of my pilgrimage are 130 years. Few and evil have been the days of the years of my life, and they have not attained to the days, the years, the life of my fathers, in the days of their pilgrimage. So Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from before Pharaoh. And Joseph situated his father and his brothers and gave them possession in the land of Egypt, in the best of the land of Ramesses, as Pharaoh had commanded. Then Joseph provided his fathers, his brothers, and all of his father's household with bread, according to the number of all their families. Not a lot, straightforward. We're just settling here. Do make mention of the fact that it talks about, verse 11, it talks about in the land of Ramesses. If you study much, you read much in history, you do have to know that there were several different Ramesses. There's a Ramesses that's going to be in the Exodus, in the book of Exodus. And so, but leadership name, if you will, Pharaoh name, very prevalent in historical times. So if you're reading history and you say, oh, okay, well, there were several, and you'd have to go back and trace them out. Anything, though? Okay, so they began to deal now with the famine. Beginning in verse 13, it says, now there was no bread in all the land, for the famine was very severe. So the land of Egypt, the land of Canaan, languished because of the famine. And Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan for the grain which they brought. And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. So when the money failed in the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, give us bread, for why should we die in your presence? For the money has failed. Then Joseph said, give your livestock, and I'll give you bread for your livestock if the money's gone. So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them bread in exchange for the horses, the flocks, the cattle, herds, and for the donkeys. Thus he fed them with bread in exchange for all their livestock that year. So what happens is commerce, right? Fair trade. Except they weren't looking at it that way. They'd been taxed. They gave the grain. Now they wanted it back, but no, I'll give you bread, but you bring the livestock. We're going to make a trade here. And so that's how it happened. And that's what went on at that point in time. And verse 18, when the year had ended, they came to him the next year and said to him, we'll not hide from my Lord that our money is gone. My Lord also has our herds of livestock. There's nothing left in the sight of our Lord but our bodies and our lands. Why should we die before our eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for bread. We and our land will be servants of Pharaoh. Give us seed that we may live and not die, that the land may not be desolate. So they're willing to work. They've basically, the famine has impoverished them. Government took everything. Now they've had to pay everything. They don't have anything left. And so it says, we're willing to work. We're willing to help out and do what we can. Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh. For every man of the Egyptians sold his field because of the famine was severe upon them. So the land became Pharaoh's. And as for the people, he moved them to the cities, from one end of the borders of Egypt to the other end. Only the land of the priest he did not buy. For the priest had rations allotted to them by Pharaoh, and they ate their rations which Pharaoh gave them. Therefore, they did not sell their lands. Interesting. A respect for those that were considered the priests of their day. Joseph said to the people in verse 23, indeed, I've brought you and your land this day for Pharaoh. I think I said brought. I bought you and your land this day for Pharaoh. Look, here is seed for you, and you shall sow the land, and it shall come to pass in the harvest that you shall give 1/5 to Pharaoh. 4/5 shall be your own as seed for the field and for your food, for those of your household, and as food for your little ones. So they gave him everything. They sold him everything. They got back food. Now all of a sudden they're having to get back sort of, if you will, almost a tax again on that which they've been given. So they said, you've saved our lives. Let us find favor in the sight of my Lord, and we will be Pharaoh's servants. Joseph made it a law over the land of Egypt to this day that Pharaoh should have 1/5, except for the land of the priest only, which did not become Pharaoh's. So Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt, in the country of Goshen. They had possessions there and grew multiplied exceedingly. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. So the length of Jacob's life was 147 years. When the time drew near that Israel must die, he called his sons Joseph and said to him, now, if I have found favor in your sight, please put your hand under my thigh and deal kindly and truly with me. Please do not bury me in Egypt, but let me lie with my fathers. You shall carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burial place. And he said, I will do as you have said. Then he said, swear to me. And he swore to him. So Israel bowed himself on the bed, or on the head of the bed. So you have preparation about dying. The vow that Joseph makes to his father Jacob, don't bury me in Egypt. I may insult a person or two with this story. I hope not. I don't mean to. My father, for all of his working career, except for the last 10 years, ran a department store, worked for what was called at the time P.N. Hirsch and Company. It was a very large corporation, actually. There were 1,500 stores. And Dad got a store when I was little, when I was about 3 years old. Dad got a store down or up in Mounds, Illinois. Now, if you don't know where Mounds, Illinois is, it's about 12 miles from Cairo, Illinois. If you don't know where Cairo is, it's like when you get into the very tip of southern Illinois, you're there, and you're there between the Mississippi and the Ohio River. It's in that area. And Mounds is a small community, about 1,500 people. But anyway, P.N. Hirsch had a store there, and it was far peaked. It was about 2 hours for us to go home. And what home was for my parents was Humboldt, Tennessee, West Tennessee. And I still remember as a little fella, my mother telling my father, if something happens to me, do not bury me up here. Take me back to West Tennessee and bury me. Well, of course, they lived a long, long time, moved back to West Tennessee for many, many, many years. And she's buried beside Dad in West Tennessee. But, yeah, don't bury me here. And I can't read that part of that without thinking about what Mom would tell Dad. Don't bury me here in Egypt. Take me out. Take me back. and bury me there. Anything else? Okay, so we get into chapter 48 next week, and 49 and 50 we're moving kind of quickly because it's just story more than practical application. Let me tell you where I'm headed because I need your help. As soon as we finish the 50th chapter, we're going to take a break from biblical studies, from the standpoint of textual studies. We're going to study a series of lessons entitled How to Get the Most Out of Your Bible. And it's about Bible study methods, but also in study methods, it's going to talk about how to interpret, biblical interpretation. And so I need your input as far as what all you would like to see in it. I'm not saying it will be in that, but I like to go through a text for a little while, but then I like to do some studies, some theme studies. They are profitable for me and for you as well. But you know when I teach, I basically teach for me, right? I get far more out of it than you do. And so I assure you. And so, but if you know something with regards to Bible study methods or along that line, biblical interpretation, tell me, and we will be glad to see what we can do to get that in that series of lessons. Anything else that needs to be talked about? All right, well, let's bow for a word of prayer. Our Father in heaven, we're thankful for this day, for the opportunity to study your word, for what it means to us, for it being a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. We're thankful for the story of Joseph, for the many things that it reveals, for your steadfastness and your love for us, for also about how to forgive and how to go about forgiving others and how to treat others in the midst of when they do things against us. For the fact that we can have our faith revived in times in which we've gone through very dark days. For the fact that as well that you, in your power, take care of us and watch over us. That even when seemingly everything is bad, dark clouds, that you're there and that you're watching over us. We ask that you be with us, that you watch over us, bless us, and keep us, and that you hold us as we hold to you. For this is our prayer in Christ's name, amen. Thank y'all. Have a great week.